Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, our brand new show on Sky Sports Premier League that drops every single Friday afternoon. Come here for some of the deepest analysis you can find on football YouTube. Hear about our thoughts about the defensive midfielder that Liverpool should sign.
And I think you go for, one of the best long-term prospects in English football.
We run through some strikers that Barcelona could sign.
Vitor Roque appears to be leaving as well. What a failure of a signing that has proven to be, given that he was a big money arrival, even though much of that money was based on add-ons and appearances.
I think he would be an actually transformative signing for Barcelona.
And who is the right winger that Newcastle should look to bring in? I think he's got the quality to play on the right wing for Newcastle. We've talked about the fact that they could have done with maybe a little bit more creativity, a little bit more guile against deep set defences that aren't going to just be overwhelmed by their running power and their physicality. I think he'd also provide that as well. Yes, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today I'm joined by Michael McCubbin and Joe Tomlinson. Joe, you okay? You enjoying the start of the season?
Yeah, mate, good result Friday night for Manchester United, so I'm pretty happy with that. But overall, I thought it was a pretty entertaining first weekend of football. How are you, Mike?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well. Yeah, also, pretty entertaining. Enjoyed Leicester Tottenham on Monday night in particular. Actually, I thought that was
Vardy.
a great Vardy back with a bang. So I'm enjoying it and looking forward to the final week of the transfer window as well.
Yes.
I do feel like it's been gearing up, hasn't it? I think it's going to be quite wild. Hopefully. And that leads us on to today's episode, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Today we're trying to fix your club with £100 million. Joe, explain your role. You're returning as the much-loved sporting director.
Yeah, well, £100 million is quite generous for some of these teams because they clearly don't have £100 million worth of budget. But we're kind of suggesting here, money is really no object. Who would be a signing that would be quite transformative for that side? We're going to start with Liverpool. A couple of positions I'm looking for from my chief scouts here, who are both going to pitch a player, and I'm going to award a point based on the best pitch. I'm going to start with the defensive midfield position. Obviously, the Zubimendi deal collapsed, didn't it? It appears so far that they're not going to re-enter the market. It also appears that Arne Slot doesn't particularly favour Wataru Endo, who is now 31 years old. We saw Nyonyi coming on in pre-season ahead of him. Gravenberch was deployed there, wasn't he, against Ipswich? So let's start with the Liverpool defensive midfield role. Who are you going to pitch to, me?
Okay, yeah, I do think it is the obvious position for Liverpool. Endo 31, Bajcetic coming off a 41-game layoff last year. My suggestion is a long shot, but I really liked this player before he moved to the Premier League, and I'm going with Edson Alvarez of West Ham. They have just signed Guido Rodriguez from Real Betis. I don't really see West Ham choosing to get rid of Edson Alvarez at this stage, but if Liverpool came in with, a £40 million offer, maybe they'd be tempted because their midfield options do look pretty plentiful at the moment. He's a good age. He's 26. He's 6'2". He's got experience playing at centre-back as well, which could be handy for the second section of the Liverpool area of the show that we're getting into in due course. He obviously joined West Ham in a £35 million deal last year. 42 appearances, really good injury record. 28 starts in the league, 1 goal, 1 assist, but that is really not his game. He brings a calmness in front of the back four. His tackle success rate is very, very solid as well. 4.4 defensive actions per 90 in a West Ham side that did invite a certain amount of pressure, but I did think he particularly impressed in some of his efforts to evade pressure last year as well. And he's a very good reader of the game, understands where he needs to be, ranks in the top 2% of midfielders for blocks and clearances. Not the most amazing passer, I will say that.
This is the problem, dudes. I don't want to come in here and start hammering suggestions straight away. But very clearly, Arne Slot doesn't want a destroyer. He wants a player in the mould of Zubimendi who can pick the ball up in the first phase and progress it. He wants a player maybe like Ryan Gravenberch that we saw deployed against Ipswich in that role, an upgrade on him to allow McAllister the more freer role. If he wanted a destroyer, he would have been playing Endo.
I get that, but I do think you look at where midfields are going, particularly in the Premier League at the moment. Rice, Rodri, Mikel Merino potentially arriving at Arsenal. Physicality, I think, is really becoming increasingly popular. Yes, it might not be the archetype Slot signing, but I do think he offers something different to Bajcetic, something different to Endo as well. There is a little bit more to his game in that position than Endo at least. And I like the fact he can play at centre-back as well. I think it's a long shot, but I don't think he'd cost a huge amount necessarily, and maybe West Ham would be drawn into it given the signings they've already made in that area.
I think that is a brave call. I think the door is firmly ajar there. I was having a look at some of Ryan Gravenberch's numbers in that first game against Ipswich. He was deployed in that 6th role. The 3rd most touches on the pitch, the 2nd most passes completed, the joint most passes into the final third. I think that's what he's looking for from his 6. I think in the second half against Ipswich, when they got a little bit more tired, Gravenberch really came into his own. So, Mikey, I think the door is ajar if you've got a suggestion of a deep-lying playmaker.
Well, I mean, I've gone for a really punchy shout, and I think a player who I think Liverpool, regardless really of who's in charge, I think should be going for. And I think he offers an all-round game. I think he is just, in terms of the long term, if we're thinking about like fixing Liverpool, let's face it, like Liverpool don't need that much fixing, but the end goal for Liverpool and for Arne Slot is to make Liverpool a genuine tight, Arsenal, Man City level club again. And I think you go for, one of the best long-term prospects in English football, and that's Adam Wharton. I think you have to go for him at defensive midfielder. Very expensive.
Get your checkbook
entire budget.
Get your checkbook out. But I mean, look, Liverpool wanted Zubimendi before. That was going to be, 60 million euros. Adam Wharton comes in maybe for 15, 20 million pounds more than that. I'm not saying they try and go for him now, but I think in the long run.
You think Palace would be open to doing deals at 70, 80 million pounds?
I think so, yeah.
Really?
Having lost potentially Gehi, Joachim Anderson as well.
But they're already, they're already making, they're very good. Doogie Friedman is very good at, finding replacements, finding cheap replacements very, very early on for these players, right? He's already, got someone in place for Gehi leaving in the long term, potentially. Joachim Anderson, I think you back Palace to find someone cheaper there. I think Adam Wharton, I just think it's only so long until the pressure from a top club becomes too much. And I think Liverpool, I think they have to spend the majority, if they're going to really lock down that position long term, they need to get the checkbook out. I think, a defensive midfielder who can do everything that Arne Slot wants is, at an absolute premium in this market. And I think Adam Wharton just feels like such a good fit. Like his progressive pass numbers already look really, really promising. He is also like physical and a really good ball winner. But I just think his calmness under pressure, especially coming into a Palace side that were, transforming quite quickly. His first minutes in the Premier League last year, he just looked so comfortable. And he's not a huge ball carrier, but I think he could develop into one. He's so good at, evading the press and picking out, progressive passes, so instinctively. And you just think about the options that Liverpool have in that forward line, the likes of Szoboszlai, the likes of Mo Salah, the likes of Diogo Jota. Like, I just think he's got such quality players to aim for there. And yeah, I just think you go for it. I know it's very punchy as a midfield target, and maybe the next position I'm in a little bit of a harder place for because of that. But I think Adam Wharton, the defensive midfield position has to be the priority, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And look, punchiness, we can talk about Liverpool not classically spending big amounts of money. Punchiness was there last summer when £115 million bids were going in for Moises Caicedo before he went to Chelsea. Clearly, the cash was there to spend on a number 6, wasn't it, at the time? And if they believe they are looking still for the long term problem solver for that role, it's going to cost a lot of money. Wataru Endo at the time felt like quite a short-term signing because of his age, given his profile before joining Liverpool. And I have to say, I think Adam Wharton is going to be highly coveted, especially next summer. Manchester United, if Manuel Ugarte doesn't join the club, are probably going to be looking for a 6. City might even be looking for a 6 in the long term to find a replacement for Rodri in there. Liverpool as well, Wharton's name will come up with all of these clubs. If Liverpool could pay a little bit of a premium and bring him in now, try and jump the queue, it might be a fairly smart bit of business. Only thing I'm going to say is that I do agree with Doogie. With Anderson going and Elise going, they are bankrolled already. They probably have the ability to say no to a Gehi bid now and give him a new contract. With Cheikh Doucouré coming back into that midfield, that combination feels lovely, doesn't it? Doucouré and Wharton, so they're going to be desperate to keep him for another year. I think it would cost more than 75 or 80 million pounds, but it's a good pitch.
I'm not really necessarily thinking about this year because I think I don't actually think that Liverpool are going to be able to sign a defensive midfielder between now and the end of the transfer window. Like, I'm thinking like it has to be a long-term fix. Like, yeah, if they're going to sign someone in the next week, I don't think he's going to be that guy.
That's when Edson Alvarez steps in.
Yeah. Well, but Edson Alvarez, again, it's like Edson Alvarez is just another short-term fix, right? And I also just don't think West Ham give up that kind of depth in midfield with so little of the window to go to either.
And I don't think he's a slot player necessarily, but we're also going to have a look at another role for Liverpool. Yeah. Just tentatively, I think we should touch on the centre-back, to be honest with you. News this week potentially that Joe Gomez is leaving the club, obviously left out of the squad against Ipswich. Joel Matip has also already left the club. Sepp van den Berg, it seems a £20 million price on his head is going to be paid very soon, which would leave just Konate, a 33-year-old Van Dijk with 1 year left on his contract at this stage, and Jarell Quansah, who looks absolutely sensational, but that might be a little bit light. So... Yep. I'm going to ask for some centre-back suggestions, I think, on the provisor that Gomez and Van den Berg are sold.
Yeah, okay. Well, I used the majority of my budget on this signing, my £100 million. I really like this player. I have suggested in the past for this kind of role, David Hansko of Feyenoord, who worked under Arne Slot in the past at Feyenoord, of course. I've also suggested Piero Hincapié, who plays for Bayer Leverkusen. And I'm basically looking for a left-sided, left-footed centre-back that could also potentially even cover at left-back, because we're not sure what happens in long term with Andy Robertson. Has had a bit of a tail off in the last few years. I think that's probably fair to say. But, you know, all the best for him for this year. Is Tsimikas their long-term left-back? You look at where Arsenal have gone with Calafiori and Timber. People are going for big, maybe centre-back, left-back kind of cover. Yeah, Gvardiol, etc. So I'm suggesting Nico Schlotterbeck of Borussia Dortmund. Still only 24 years old, entering his third year at Borussia Dortmund, signed from Freiburg for around £25 million 2 years ago. He's missed 5 games in 2 seasons for Dortmund, and I think he had a really poor, along with a lot of the Germany national team, a really poor 2022 World Cup, and he looked a little bit out of place, a little bit out of his depth. And I think that's actually coloured people's opinions of him as a player, because I actually think for Dortmund, he's been pretty exceptional for both years now. He's twice been named in the Bundesliga team of the season, once with his final year at Freiburg, once in his first year at Dortmund. And this is a guy whose passing numbers are absolutely excellent, and his carrying numbers as well. Ranks in the top 4% of centre-backs for progressive carries, 8th for progressive passes in the entire Bundesliga last season. That's, you know, competing against midfielders like Granit Xhaka. 2nd for passes completed in the entire Bundesliga last year. And Dortmund, it feels like they're at an interesting point now. They are, you know, they've signed Waldemar Anton this summer from Stuttgart. There's a lot of big names that are departing. Marco Reus has left. They haven't managed to sign Ian Maatsen. They haven't managed to sign Jadon Sancho. They finished 5th last year. Nuri Sahin has come in as their new manager. Where's that project going? It does feel quite a few years behind Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich now. Would they potentially, or would he be interested at a 40-50 million pound move to Liverpool? I think absolutely. I think he'd be a really, really solid fit there.
Okay, so we've got Schlotterbeck being suggested. Mikey, how are you going to hit back?
I do like that suggestion. So I had to have a bit of a rethink here on the basis of Adam Wharton being so expensive. I was initially thinking Gonzalo Inacio at Sporting CP, but it feels unlikely that Liverpool will be able to get him for under £50 million. And I think I need to target a centre-back who is gettable for under that. I was thinking Hincapié at Leverkusen, but similarly, you know, they've been looking at him. But yeah, I think, again, it might be more difficult. So I've actually gone for a player who I was initially looking at for another one of the clubs we're looking at today. And I've swapped him over. So this is a bit of a last minute thing, but I think it could work given that this club's recent history with selling academy players, given that in the next year they may well be desperate to sell more academy players. And I think probably the most sellable asset going here, and I think a player who really fits basically what Doogie was saying in terms of left-sided centre-backs.
Some tease.
It's Levi Colwill at Chelsea.
Whoa! I thought you were going to say Trevor Chalobah.
How much money are we talking about here for Levi?
I think Levi Colwill could be gettable for less than £40 million.
You're crazy.
I'm not sure I am.
Were they linked with him last year, Levi Colwill? Maybe I've completely.
I think they're going to look to build their entire defensive unit around Levi Colwill, who's been brought into a leadership role in that team. And Reece James are stood up as sort of the last bastions of this Cobham excellence group.
But
for the next 12 months.
If there's one thing we know about Chelsea is that you can't plan for 6 months in the future. We have no idea what the thinking is going to be at Chelsea. Yeah, come January, let alone the end of next season. It's completely dependent on whether Maresca, survives there. I think this time last year, Pochettino's Chelsea looked like a very, very different project. Colwell was being played at left back. Didn't seem actually like the most important player there. I know like Disasi's been linked with a move away now, but I just think Chelsea, like the spending that Chelsea continue to do in the market means that they need to sell academy players. That's at least been been the strategy so far. And so far, I have no reason to believe that that's going to change significantly. I just think there's going to be a price on him. I think if you pay a price for Levi Colwill, and if they're desperate enough for another reinforcement next summer, whoever they decide to bring in, then I think he is going to be gettable. And if Liverpool have a significantly better season than Chelsea this year, which I think, again, I would probably back them to do so, then I think it's a really, really tantalising project to join for Levi Colwill.
Oh, Levi Colwill. I think, to be honest with you, my opinion is that he's going to get priced out of a move there. Like, I know you talk about them accepting lower fees for like players from the academy, but even players on 1-year contracts that have been deemed surplus to requirements. You think of Mason Mount exiting from Chelsea with 1 year left in his contract, went for 60 million. Conor Gallagher this summer has gone for 40 million. I think there are still premiums on Chelsea academy players because of the quality of Cobham. Now, whether or not that continues in the long term, I still think Levi Colwill in the short term is probably the cream of the crop alongside Reece James in terms of the best players to come out of the academy and still make an impact in that side. And if he is long term seen as a potential captaincy candidate, I would just be stunned to see him leave Chelsea.
But then at stages you'd be stunned last year for Chelsea to let Conor Gallagher go. Like, you'd be stunned for them to let them go of Havertz, Mount, Kovacic. Like, they've made some bizarre sales in the last few years, and I think anyone's kind of expendable, particularly if they're a pure profit player. Like, I feel like if Reece James has another injury hit season, I wouldn't be amazed if Reece James is sold next summer. I really wouldn't. They are running out of academy graduates to sell. Malo Gusto's already at the club. Levi Colwill, they've got Disasi, they've got Badia Shield, they've got Fofana, they've got Tosin.
But Colwill was better than all of these players.
I agree, but I feel like Gallagher was better than a lot of their midfielders last year.
I don't necessarily agree with that point. I think that the midfield options Chelsea have, Lavia was injured for large portions of the last season. I think his return, as we've seen from the opening game, is a massive factor for them. And in my mind, he was behind Enzo Fernandez, behind Caicedo in the midfield pecking order. Then you arrive Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, who is a favourite of Maresca. And I think for the last 2 or 3 months, with no contract on the table, the writing was kind of on the wall that a deal was going to get done for Conor Gallagher. Similar sort of thing for Mason Mount in his final season at Chelsea. I don't know whether that writing's in a similar way for Levi Colwill for me. So I'm going to side with a 1-1 split here.
Okay.
I'm going to give it... I do like the Adam Wharton suggestion. I think it's such a good option for Liverpool. And Schlotterbeck, who... You never know with Borussia Dortmund, do you? They might change tact quite
might have
quickly.
broken £100 million.
And we definitely have broken £100 million. I really don't care. Next up, I think we're going to go to Newcastle.
Yeah. Why don't you kick off, Mikey? I kicked off the last
sure.
Should we start with the right winger?
Let's go for it. I'm going to suggest someone who actually suggested a few weeks ago for Liverpool, weirdly enough. But I think Newcastle really need a right winger. They have done for a long time. That James Maddison chat, was it last year that they were really in for him before Spurs swooped in? That's almost kind of been and gone now. I think Newcastle still could do with a creative midfielder, but I think in terms of the way they play, in terms of how stacked they are at centre forward, given Anthony Gordon's impact on the left, I think, right winger, a real pure winger, and someone who is also adept at both scoring and assisting, I just think turns Newcastle into a Champions League favourite, actually, in terms of like qualifying for the Champions League. You look at last season, they ended up with 85 goals. Like that is top 4 material. That's top 3 or top 2 material. If they can stay defensively sound, and we'll get onto that in a little bit. I've gone for Simon Adingra out of Brighton once again.
You are pitching this.
I am pushing this guy around, but I just think someone's got to go for him. Like Brighton, like even in the next week, like, you know, there's been there's murmurs around like him being an option as the Saka backup at Arsenal, and he can play on both wings as well. So if God forbid Anthony Gordon does get injured, then he's an option there as well. But I mean, he is a massive upgrade on Miguel Almiron, and having come up, you know, in the De Zerbi system as well, I think he off the ball, he offers the kind of work rate that Eddie Howe's looking for in the forward line as well. His attacking numbers across the board are excellent. In terms of his chance creation, he's a little bit down on Gordon, but I think that's only going to improve. He takes over 2 shots a game as well. He's more of a ball carrier as well. Like you could feed the ball to him on the halfway line, and he's going to progress play for you, which I think takes the pressure off the midfield as well. And perhaps, you know, lets Bruno Guimaraes focus on his relationships with Gordon and Isak a little bit more, allows Joe Linton to dominate that left-hand side as well a little bit more too. I think, yeah, it just makes that attack so much more well-balanced. And I know, obviously, we're going for a right winger, so that's the aim, right, is to make the attack more well-balanced anyway. But I think Adingra, I think his work rate, I think really sets him apart in that sense. And I think he's gettable for a really good fee. I think at Brighton, you know, they're so well stacked in that forward line. And I just think if you have Adingra, if say Adingra loses his place this year at some point, I think his value potentially goes down. Whereas right now, I think he is a solid 45 million pound player. And I just think that's good value for both the seller and the buyer.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like that door has been slightly opened with the arrival of Minter, who has kind of, in the thoughts anyway of many fans, usurped him already, given that he had such an excellent pre-season. We saw the impacts he had last year at Feyenoord, and he was at Newcastle. I think in an ideal world, Newcastle would absolutely be playing Minter in that right-hand side space, but given the PSR issues, he was forcibly sold. So could that somehow have a little domino effect to allow Adingra to come back? Just touching on a couple of other options Newcastle do have that I think will have big impacts this season. You know, Harvey Barnes, out for pretty much the whole campaign last year with that toe injury. His goal scoring numbers, 13 the season before that, goal involvement, 16 the season before that. They paid £40 million from Leicester. Like, I'm expecting a big season for Harvey Barnes if he's fit and firing. So the player that comes in has to have, I think, an immediate impact. I don't think this can be a player for the future, Duke. So you're going to suggest?
No, I think you're right to point out the sort of optics around a potential Adingra deal, in that, you know, letting go of Minter, bringing someone back from Brighton for potentially more money, it might not go down that well with the fan base, although I do really rate Adingra. My player's quite punchy. It's a loan move, but I can see it happening. Arda Guler of Real Madrid. I think there is a potential opportunity there. You know, he missed so many games last year, 29 games with injury, still only 19, signed for what, 20 million euros or so from Fenerbahce, but you saw in the Euros how talented he was. I mean, you saw at the back end of last year. I mean, he scored 6 goals in his final 12 games, having missed 3/4 of the season for Real Madrid. This is a really high quality player. And do Real Madrid need him this year? You know, they've got Rodrigo, who potentially is playing a little bit more of a backup role if the balance of that attack is going to be reshifted. They've still got Brahim Diaz. Fede Valverde can play on the right-hand side as well. And watching them in that opening game against Mallorca, that 1-1 draw, the balance of that side wasn't quite right with Vinicius, Mbappe and Rodrigo. So it feels like Ancelotti might shuffle his pack. Maybe Bellingham plays more as a sort of 10 or a false 9 with Vinicius and Mbappe either side. Would Ancelotti accept a loan deal this late on for Arda Guler? Potentially not. I think he will pick up minutes at various points for Real Madrid, but there is the potential there, and I think they should at least sound it out. And I do think he's got the quality to play on the right wing for Newcastle. We've talked about the fact that they could have done with maybe a little bit more creativity, a little bit more guile against deep set defences that aren't going to just be overwhelmed by their running power and their physicality. I think he'd also provide that as well. And Real Madrid have loved a loan in the past as well. Like Odegaard's gone out on loan, then sold for big money. Kubo's gone out on loan, sold for big money. Like they don't really mind letting players go out on loan if they can then up their value, sell them for a profit. And look, Arda Guler looks like he's going to be a sensational talent, but is he going to get the game time right now this season? Maybe not. So maybe they could go for a loan move.
I like the Guler suggestion. It'd be really fun. It would be a really fun move, but I just see it as slightly unrealistic. I think Real Madrid are going to want to keep him as part of that group and see him develop with the quality of players around him. I also am not sure whether his off-the-ball work rate particularly suits his Newcastle side. He'd obviously be an amazing creative force, but does he want to have to do the dog work Eddie Howe is going to ask of him? Whereas we've seen a player like Adingra do that in a De Zerbi side. His off-the-ball work rate is exceptional, and I really like that move. I actually think it would be a very, very smart bit of business, not only in the short term, but in the long term, given his age profile. So I'm going to give that one to Adingra. But that's not the only bit of business I think Newcastle need to do. Obviously, centre-back options feel pretty thin with Sven Botman out long-term with that ACL injury. Started, 17 games, I think, last season, so not huge amounts. Fabian Schär, obviously, now suspended, now 32 years old, started 35 games last season, so big numbers. Lascelles has got the ACL. We've obviously seen Lloyd Kelly arrive to play that sort of backup hybrid left-back, left centre-back role. But they have been going for Mark Gahey. So now that Gahey feels like it might be fizzling out with Anderson joining Fulham, who are we going to suggest?
This is a really tough one. I was initially going to go for Colwill for Newcastle, but I just think actually...
You're selling him to anyone.
I'm selling for it to anyone.
You're crazy.
But I thought... Thing is, with the Mark Gahey move, like do they actually need a left-sided centre-back here? Like, we're talking about Botman being out for this long. I think they need someone who can play on both sides.
I think they would have played Gahey as a right-sided centre-back alongside Botman.
Yeah, I think this is the thing. As a left-sided centre-back alongside Botman.
No, because Botman's left-footed, left-sided centre-back. I think he would have been the long-term heir to Fabian Schär.
So, like, I think this is where they need to go for, right? And so... We've seen them linked, in the wake of the Gahey deal breaking down, Edmund Tapsoba at Bayer Leverkusen, and I just think he'll be tough to get out of them. Like, we're not talking about someone who would be easy to get out of their club in the last week of the transfer window. I think the chances would be slim, but I think he's exactly the kind of profile that Newcastle should be going for. He's a bit of a leader back there. He's more of a progressive player than someone like Botman as well. I think that's someone that they really, really need. If Newcastle are going to go to the next level, they need someone who actually is a real ball progressor out of the back, and Tapsoba can offer that. We saw how brilliant, that whole back line were at progressing play. Under Xabi Alonso last season, and Seoane before him as well. I just think, someone like that who's versatile, who's a bit of a leader, very physical, but is a really, really good passer out the back as well. I think Tapsoba would be the guy. And also, I think even if they weren't able to get him out of there in the next week or so, or next January even, Bayer Leverkusen don't sell players for that, for a huge price. And I've got another suggestion later on that I'm going to make a similar argument for. Players are gettable out of there, and especially if Xabi Alonso looks like he's going to say Real Madrid halfway through the season, I think there could be a mass exodus from Leverkusen, and I think they will struggle to sell players for a big, big profit.
Yeah, I have to say, the Edmund Tapsoba deal does make a lot of sense on paper, doesn't it? But it is going to be a difficult deal to get done. Obviously, Fabian Schär himself is such an excellent player on the ball. I think vastly underrated in terms of his passing range. He actually progresses the ball really nicely, like on it, just driving into those midfield spaces. So his long-term heir does have to do that, really, doesn't he? And Tapsoba has certainly proved he can do that in the Bundesliga, particularly last year in that unbeaten campaign. But Doogie, have you got another suggestion?
Yeah, I think Tapsoba's a good one, because it did feel like at the start of the summer, rather, Bayer Leverkusen were probably going to sell one star, and for most of the previous few weeks of the end of the season, it looked like Jeremy Frimpong. That looks like it's not happening. Jonathan Tah to Bayern Munich's been called off, so maybe you could get Tapsoba, but I'm actually going to suggest a move that I could actually really, really see being done in the next week, and that's Joe Gomez to Newcastle. I don't think he'd cost a lot of money. Like, he's not included in that first squad against Ipswich. He only cost £3.5 million from Charlton. He spent the last 9 seasons at Liverpool. I think he's the only Brendan Rodgers player that's still at the club. I think Bobby Firmino and him were the last
He's
surviving.
the longest serving Liverpool player.
Absolutely unbelievable. And I know what you guys are going to say, injuries. And yes, there have been 3 campaigns in particular where he's missed 45 games in a season, but that was 2015-16, 16-17 and 2021. In the last 3 seasons, he actually only missed 6 games. And last year, he played 51 games, playing at left back, playing at right back, which I actually think is worth including as well, because Kieran Trippier's future, I don't think he's going to leave this window now, but they've got to consider the future without Trippier.
Tino, though.
They've got Tino Livramento, but the fact he can play there, I think, is helpful. Dan Burn is getting on a little bit, whether he can be slightly upgraded at left back. Lewis Hall still relatively unproven. I like the fact that Joe Gomez can play all across the back line. And his form was so good for Liverpool last year that he made the Euro squad. People forget because he didn't play very many minutes, but he was there. And he had an excellent year. He's also incredible in the air, which I think is quite handy in this Liverpool side, in this potential Newcastle side as well. Won 76% of his aerial duels last year. That was only topped by Van Dijk and Maguire in the entire Premier League. I think he's gettable. I don't think he'd actually cost a hell of a lot of money either. I think he might be £30 million, £35 million. And I like his versatility. He's still not super old either. I think this could be done.
I think it's a much more realistic deal to see done. But I don't necessarily think that's coming into my thinking.
Oh, here we go.
Like, I do like Gomez, and I think he's a very sort of unique profile in his ability to play all across the back line. But I'm looking for a player that's going to come in and have a massive impact in that centre-back role, be extremely punchy for Newcastle and set a bit of a statement, to be honest with you, because I think by missing out on Mark Gahey, they're almost on the back foot a little bit. That feels like quite a big failure, doesn't it? Especially when Paul Mitchell has just come through the door as this new sporting director. Gahey was the number one target to land. We've seen a pursuit that's lasted a month. 4 different bids have gone in. If that doesn't happen, and I think if they end up going for Joe Gomez, in many fans' eyes, I think it might end up being a little bit of a disappointment just because he's not a guaranteed starter to oust Shah. Whereas I think Edmund Tapsoba has that excitement factor a little bit more. I don't know whether...
Also, we're working with £100 million budget
might be
here.
more thrilling,
Dukes, you've gone for a lone player and a centre-back who could be gettable
Arda
for
Guler's
35
wages to get him over from
£100 million
Madrid
here.
is going to cost a fair amount of money.
I'm going to go for...
my final push. Tapsoba plays on the left-hand side of that Bayer Leverkusen back.
He does, but he's right-footed.
Joe Gomez has won a league title playing as the right-hand-sided centre-back at Liverpool. He's had some amazing seasons at Liverpool.
I would agree, Dukes, but he spent the entire season pretty much playing at left-back last year, so...
He can do it all.
He can do it all, but, you know, given that Tapsoba is right-footed as well, I think he can also play on that right-hand side of the centre-back role.
And Capio played a lot of minutes on the left side as well.
Exactly. Just like, you know, we saw Mark Gahey playing as a left-sided centre-back at Crystal Palace last year, but he can actually play as a right-sided centre-back. I'm going to give this one to Mikey. Both points. 3-1.
Wow.
You're scrambling a little bit here.
Wow.
Hugely.
As we head on to the continent.
Yeah, so we're doing one inclusion from the continent. Who are we talking about?
We're going to talk about Barcelona. Now, we're fully aware that Barcelona don't have £100 million to spend. They are crippled financially after those Liverpools, which you have to say now, looking back on it, look even worse, really, when the amount of La Masia graduates we saw at the weekend against Valencia, called upon by Hansi Flick, was, I think, 8 players in the used 16. Like, I think it's pretty worrying that most of the players that were bought with those lever funds have either been put up for sale or, you know, they would be very open to having offers for. Nevertheless, we're going to pretend that Barcelona pull a couple more levers. Some money comes through the door and we want to sign players. And I'm going to start with the defensive midfield role.
Yeah.
Personally, because, you know, we can talk about the links to the likes of Chiesa and Rafa Leao that we've seen over the last couple of days, but we saw Romeo leave, no replacement bought in for him. He was a short-term fix anyway. At the weekend, we saw Marc Bernal used against Valencia, obviously extremely highly rated, but still just 17 years old. There were 3 17-year-olds starting against Barcelona, starting against Valencia, in Kabasi, Bernal and Yamal. So let's say he needs some support because Gavi's out, still with the knee problem. De Jong, you know, he's on 700 grand a week, given that backdated wage, isn't he, reportedly? So who is an option in the defensive midfield position, Michael?
Okay, I'm going to go very punchy again. And a bit of an obvious shout.
Adam Wharton.
Adam Wharton to Barca. He would be brilliant at Barca, wouldn't he? I'd absolutely love that. But no, I'm going for someone who I think is... Well, I mean, he's been all over the back pages this summer. Zubimendi. I'm going for Zubimendi. Obvious shout, of course.
Simple.
Yeah, I
They've tried to get him out there in the past, haven't they? And
They have, but I just think unless Zubimendi wants to spend the rest of his career at Sociedad,
those mountains calling.
Like, I just think if he is going to leave, I see him staying in Spain. I think if Liverpool still have Klopp at the helm, then I think he would have been a lot more tempted by the Liverpool move. I think he feels like a player who needs a club with really amazing pull. And as we've seen from Barcelona, even over the last few years, where they've been clearly second best to Real Madrid in terms of the project that they offer, they still have that pull over the majority of top clubs in Europe. And, you know, for Zubimendi to stay in Spain, but go to, you know, one of the 2 biggest clubs there, I just think Barcelona have that pull. And if it gets to next summer and Zubimendi's getting itchy feet, Marino's gone, you know, Sociedad finish say 8th or 9th, which is feasible, despite, Alguacil's brilliance, that it's always competitive around that part of the table. They dropped out of the Champions League spots last year. I could see him potentially having his mind changed. The only thing that would change that is if Xabi Alonso goes to Madrid and Madrid somehow put an offer in for him and he wants to link back up with the coach who coached him at Sociedad B. But even then, do Real Madrid go back in for him? They've got so much midfield depth there now. I don't think they, unless an offer comes in for Tchouaméni, that they're what, we might just replace him. I just can't see that happening. I think Zubimendi to Barcelona just makes a lot of sense. He suits the style of play. I think Hansi Flick will be looking for a ball-playing 6 in the same way that he utilised Kimmich in that Bayern Munich side. I think Kimmich played his best football as a deep-lying midfielder under Hansi Flick. And I think Zubimendi could fit that role as well.
Zubimendi does feel very Barcelona, doesn't he? We've long talked about him being the heir to Busquets' throne, but it feels almost at this stage like he's going to be a one-club man. He's turned down so many offers. He's turned down Liverpool, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, reported offers from Real Madrid and Barcelona in the past. It's going to be very difficult to get him out of there. Dudes, I think there's a door ajar here for you.
Wow. Mine is quite a niche shout, I think. Oh. And, you guys have been
complaining about to miss an open goal here.
That I haven't that I haven't used enough budget. And I've gone for a slightly player at a different end of the scale in terms of age. Look, okay, if you look at Barcelona's midfield options, if and when İlkay Gündoğan leaves on a free, great investment from Barcelona. What a turnaround. Great decision as well. The most used player from last year. Fantastic. Man City absolutely rubbing their hands together. But I do think the age of this midfield has to be taken into account. So Bernal's 17, Gavi, Casado are 20, Pedri's 21, Pablo Torres 21, Fermin Lopez is 21, Dani Olmo's 26, and Frenkie de Jong is 27. I think they could do with an experienced head. And I'm going to suggest they should sign Hakan Çalhanoğlu off Inter Milan. Recently rebuilt into a deep-lying playmaker. Yeah. And he has been phenomenal there for the last 3 seasons at Inter Milan. Made AC Milan fans sort of eat their words who were celebrating his departure. Of course, he played in a different role at Milan. But now at Inter, he's played 40 games per season there. Shows no sign of slowing down. I think he should age quite nicely because his game's never really relied on
How
pace.
old is he now?
He's only 30.
Smells a bit Pjanic-y though, doesn't it?
Yeah, my only thing with this move, Dukes, is because I was actually Çalhanoğlu came up when I was thinking about Barcelona here, partly because I was thinking budget, and I don't think Çalhanoğlu at his age would cost that much, and he's been sensational for Inter. But the reason why I didn't pick him was because I just fear that in a new system under a new manager, does he get found out in a Barcelona team, say in a double pivot or in a midfield 3? We've only seen him excel in this role in Inzaghi's 3-5-2 system. I just worry whether the magic would suddenly dissipate at a new club. That would be my worry with him, because he's played so many different positions over the years, and some have stuck, some haven't. In some ways, he feels like a bit of a modern Barca signing, doesn't he? Not necessarily a long-term fix.
You've got your Joe Laporta cap on.
Yeah, business is booming.
Or even my Bartomeu cap on, in 2020.
I'm saying 20-30 million pounds. I'm not saying go crazy, but actually Inter have a lot of midfield options now. They've got Zielinski in. Fratese's, adapted better than just his first year, let's say. Mkhitaryan's still there. Barella's still there. Asllani, they've got big hopes for. He's only 22. He's going to play that position long term. If you offered £30 million, which I don't think Barcelona have anyway, for Çalhanoğlu, who could bring so much experience and quality to that
he would be
midfield.
Tempted himself. He would be very tempted. Given we saw Fratesi and Barella play at the weekend, I think he would be.
I mean, they still do have a crazy
tempted,
pull.
Yeah.
The fact that Gündoğan was happy to go there. Yeah. I don't know. I could see it happening.
But is it smart business, a 30-year-old Çalhanoğlu coming into a totally new system with young players around him in the most pressurised environment in world football? It does feel very Joe Laporte-like. I'm going to reserve judgment here until you pitch your next name.
Okay,
because
interesting.
I do like the Zubimendi deal a lot, but functionally, do Barca have the funds to pull that deal off, or the pull factor to get it over the line, given he's rejected him in the past? I'm on the fence. So I'm actually going to ask for a striker next. Guiu has gone to Chelsea, obviously one of Barca's academy hopes there, another La Masia academy player out the door. Vitor Roque appears to be leaving as well. what a failure of a signing that has proven to be, given that he was a big money arrival, even though much of that money was based on add-ons and appearances. Appears he's going to go to Portugal, or, you know, he might stay in Spain.
Let's talk about Real Betis.
Yeah, is still interested. And that leaves just really Robert Lewandowski on the team sheet, doesn't it? And at 36 years old, earning a reported 500 to 600,000 euros a week. How sustainable is that in the long term, given last season was his lowest goal-scoring output in a decade? I still think he'll score goals, and that's fine, but it's not the most safe future plan, is it, just to have a 36-year-old Lewandowski on your books when he could pick up an injury? So I'm looking for a striker to come in and support.
Okay.
Who are you going to suggest?
I've gone very punchy again. I've gone very, very punchy again. But going by my logic with Tapsoba, I think he will be gettable in the next 2 years, maybe even next summer. You know, I'm going to say it's Victor Boniface.
Come on,
Victor
Mikey.
Boniface. Like Barcelona need to go to the next level. They need to sign one of the best strikers in Europe, and I think Boniface, I think he would be an actually transformative signing for Barcelona. Okay, like this might, like, I think you could go, you know, depending on who Doogie picks here, and in terms of our budget, I think you could go for one of these two players. Maybe I don't think both of them is maybe a bit too much, but I just think Boniface, if you can convince the player of the project at Barca, especially if Hansi Flick has a really positive first season, then I think you can twist his arm. I think you can bargain with Leverkusen next year. And, you know, £50 million, I think, would be an amazing fee for him.
In a world where we're
register
seeing,
him in 2030.
you know, in a world where we're seeing as well, the average, like, most strikers in Europe shifted around for £60 million.
I don't know.
Dominic Solanke, who is an excellent Premier League striker, has just moved for £65 million. We've seen players come out of Italy joining the Premier League, like Rasmus Højlund for £65 million. Do you believe that strikers of Boniface's rate go for 50?
I think it's possible. I think it's possible out of Leverkusen. I think that the Barcelona pull factor as well. Like, yes, it obviously involves them being a bit smarter, and it involves also another major club not coming in for him as well, which obviously is a big ask too. But I mean, let's forget the money for now, because I think that's going to be a conversation.
That's what we've done throughout the episode. I feel like I've offered £100 million together as signings.
Well, you've offered like £30 million at some point.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Your last suggestion, Arda Guler and £40 million Joe Gomez.
But I mean, yeah, like Çalhanoğlu at say 20 to 30 million and Boniface at 70 million. I don't mind. But anyway,
he knows that I'll give him a 2-shot lead.
But I just think Barcelona needs to aim high. Like if Barcelona are being linked with Rafael Leao, who is
they're linking themselves.
Yeah. But if they're backing themselves to be able to pull that off somehow, and it's a bit like with Chelsea in the last few years, like somehow they still get these deals done. Like Barcelona have proven that they can get these deals done, and every player that they've registered that they've not been able to register has been registered in the end. Like these big clubs they find a way, don't they? And I think, if you want someone who for the next 8 years could be the number 9 at Barcelona, I think they have to go down a route like this. They have to, unless they're going to pick out the next Vitor Roque. Like, again, I think you need to go for someone who's proven in Europe. And Boniface, what was it, 3rd behind Haaland and Harry Kane for post-shot expected goals, not post-shot, sorry, expected goals per 90 last year. He can also provide. He's a great dribbler. Like, he actually, he offers more than Lewandowski does right now. And he has the clinical nature of Lewandowski as well. Like, I just think him and Yamal, could you imagine them linking up together, would just be absolutely superb. Yeah. So I think, like,
sensational plan.
It's punchy. Of course it's punchy. But I think Boniface, yeah, like, and especially if, I'm not saying they will, but if we see Leverkusen drop off a little bit this year, if they don't win the league, if they don't win any trophies, then I could see, potentially his value dipping a little bit compared to the trajectory he's currently on.
Deuce. Boniface joining Lamal, joining Dani Olmo. It feels very punchy. That one, 50 million, seems like a low fee for me. Who are you going to suggest?
Well, remember that I suggested Çalhanoğlu as my defensive midfielder. So there's a
bit of budget. Yeah.
There's a bit of budget, and I'm going with Lois Openda of RB Leipzig. Really, really exciting player. I think he's delivered for the last 4 seasons now. 2 at Vitesse, 1 at Lens, even last year at Leipzig as well. 28 goals in 42 games, keeping Benjamin Šeško sort of out the side up until the latter stages. And he's really, really exciting. Much more of a a on-the-shoulder player than Victor Boniface, who's going to drop deep and link play really effectively. Quite different to Robert Lewandowski. Well, actually similar to Robert Lewandowski now, much more of a penalty box player. But Lois Openda looks really, really exciting. And I think he's got a huge ceiling. Already, he's only 24, I think. Last year, 0.74 XG per 90, which was between Darwin Núñez and Mo Salah. They were going for a quadruple at one stage of the season. They were competing for the Premier League title. He was playing for an RB Leipzig side that were dealing with the departures of Nkunku, Szoboszlai, Gvardiol. And that is also a key thing, I think, in this, that RB Leipzig don't, Gvardiol aside, they do sell at reasonable prices, I think, for the talent they have available. Yes, he cost 43 million euros. So what's that, about 38 million pounds or so? So I think if you
offered... want at least 20 million more than
I think if you offered 65 million pounds next summer, 70 million pounds, which you can do if you're signing Calhanoglu as a defensive midfielder, then you're looking Bob's your uncle, 100 million pounds spent.
But would you prefer, but say you could get Boniface for the same price? Who do you go for?
Well, I can't get Boniface and a defensive midfielder.
No, but I'm saying I'm more sweet talking Joe here.
I think Boniface is a brilliant player. They're very different players to Openda.
Yeah,
I think both would do well.
Yeah, I have to say, I really like Lois Openda. I think he's massively underrated, actually. When we talk about some of the best strikers in world football and the up-and-coming next generation of superstar strikers, Openda's never mentioned. People openly talk about Benjamin Sesko, don't they? And we saw it with Arsenal this season, and nobody was talking about Lois Openda. I'm going to give both points to Doogie here. I just don't think Zubimendi's ever going to leave Sociedad. The pull of the mountains is too much. And although I don't love Calhanoglu, it does feel very Laporte. I'm going to give it to you.
Wow.
And that evens it up at 3-0.
Just very quickly. So I had a couple of cheaper alternatives. I went punchy with Boniface. If I had suggested either Marcus Thuram or... get this one, I was also considering, and I actually think this would be a really fun signing if Liverpool were to come down on valuation. Darwin Núñez at Barca. I would absolutely love to see that.
Darwin Núñez would be really fun at
that
Barca.
Would be really,
but
really
I don't know
fun.
where I would almost prefer him off the left at Barca.
Yeah.
Which is
again, that's another area. That's for another video. I think that's for another video.
But I'm going to give 2 points to Doogie there to even it up to 3.
I wasn't trying to put in new suggestions there. I was just hypothetically wondering whether that could have swayed Joe.
That will go down well with the sporting director.
Final team then. This is a rogue one because they definitely don't have 100 million to spend.
With the new
but
stadium.
I just wanted to hear some suggestions about Everton's transfer business, really, because after the 3-0 loss to Brighton at the weekend, there were a lot of fans that weren't happy with the performance, weren't happy with the selection. We look at some of the ins this summer. Begovic, Jacob Ryan, who didn't play at the weekend, I think much to Everton fans' annoyance, to be honest with you. I think he probably has to start the next game. Regbenon looked really good in the midfield, and I expect big things of him. Iliman Ndiaye came on for Doucouré in the second half, but there are still roles that feel like they need addressing. The right back position with Ashley Young being sent off, Patterson's injury record, central midfield replacement for Amadou Onana. Obviously, Idrissa Gueye is still playing there, but how old's he now? 34, is he? 35? 34. So those two positions. They also need a striker because, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, last year his contract, the biggest underperformer in terms of XG of any striker in the Premier League last season. I think there's problems in this Everton squad. Right back to start with, boys. I need a suggestion.
Yeah, I think it is a good suggestion. Nathan Patterson has missed 23 games in 2.5 seasons. Still just 22. Big things expected of him, but injuries have been an issue. Ashley Young, 39. Seamus Coleman's 35. They need a new right back. I'm surprised that hasn't been addressed, to be honest, already. I'm suggesting Thiago Santos. Now, I know a lot of Milan fans that I follow on Twitter were really surprised that they went for Emerson Royale to replace Davide Calabria, rather than Thiago Santos, who was working at Lille last year under Paulo Fonseca. 22-year-old right back, only 1 year at Lille. Prior to that, he was playing in Portugal with Estoril. And he's a really solid defender, 2.5 tackles per 90. That's to be expected. But it's really going forward that he's really, really exciting. Nearly 2 dribbles completed per 90. For any fullback, anything over 1.2 is probably a really good score there. And last year in France, completed over 100 dribbles. That was 14th in France, with only 1 defender completing more. He's composed on the ball, but not necessarily exceptional on the ball just yet. Same age as Nathan Patterson. Maybe a similar skill set to Nathan Patterson, because I think Nathan Patterson's best attributes are going forward rather than defending. But I'm surprised no one's gone for him. He's only valued at around 20 million euros on Transfermarkt, who tend to downplay their valuations, but I think he could be gettable.
Yeah, I was surprised that Everton weren't in the race for Aaron Wan-Bissaka when he was available, to be honest with you. I think he fits the profile of a Sean Dyche fullback really quite nicely with his defensive ability, and I think he would probably have improved under Sean Dyche, his positional play. So I was surprised they weren't involved in that transfer, but I do think that's about the fee. Aaron Wan-Bissaka was, £15 million? We're talking about that 20 million euro sort of budget. Does that sound good to you, Mike?
That sounds very good to me. Yeah, that sounds very good to me.
Victor Boniface.
Did play right back as a youth player, apparently. No, I'm joking. I've gone for a bit more of a Dyche right back here. I've also gone for someone who coincidentally made a name for himself at Lille in a 4-4-2 system. It's Zeki Celik at Roma. I just think, yes, Everton, quite an old squad, but I just think in that back line, in that right back slot, they need someone a little bit in between. Zeki Celik, 27 years old. I think he's still a really, really good age. I thought kind of like in terms of short term in terms of someone who's like Premier League proven and, is defensively sound, but also pretty good to go forward. I thought like Vladimir Sofal, like with a year left on his contract, could be worth a punt if Everton are desperate in the next week. But, and also that was kind of, also have to kind of think about Wan-Bissaka and his movements. But I think Zeki Celik, he's always been very much a defence first right back. Also at Roma, like he wasn't getting a huge amount of game time last year under Daniel De Rossi. I think he only started 6 games in the end last season. He started the first game this year, but I think that's partly to do with the fact that they don't really have many other options at this moment in time. And I see Roma, if they know what's good for them, going in for a right back between now and the end of the season. The Friedkin Group also owe them a favour to Everton after pulling out of the takeover deal. But ultimately, I just think, they need a defence-first right back who is going to just be incredibly solid in that back line. Positionally, like absolutely superb. Celik doesn't offer tons going forward, but like is a decent passer, takes the pressure off Patterson in that sense, and so they've got someone experienced there, but he's not someone who's going to be in the way of Patterson for years to come. Equally, if they do feel like Patterson is a sellable asset in the next couple of years, then he offers them that, safety net in that sense. So I've gone very, very safe with that option.
Yeah, I do like it. Have to be said, I like that sort of age profile. I was going to suggest, if I'd have been on the panel, that Kyle Walker-Peters, I still think is a really good option for a club like Everton.
He's got a good shout.
Year left on his contract. They've also bought in Sugawara, Southampton, so it feels like they're preparing for an exit there. And he was linked to West Ham, wasn't he, before they went for Wan-Bissaka, and that deal never appeared. I feel like he's quite a good fit for a club like Everton. To me, that is a step up in terms of stature of the team anyway, if not immediately result-wise. So a bit surprised neither of you suggested him, but I'm going to go with Celik. Yeah, I'll give myself a point.
I thought you were going to give yourself the point there.
No, I'm going to go
you do have
with Celik. Yeah,
okay.
I am going to go with Celik. I'm also going to look for a midfielder. I still think they're a little bit light in there. Decore looks like he's going to be in that 10 role. Zubimendi put up 4th or 5th most minutes of any player in the Everton squad last year. Erigbenum looks a great option. But Gay is 34, and I think despite the fact he played 2,000 minutes last season, put up 4 tackles and interceptions per 90, the long-term heir was Onana, wasn't it? And he's now exited. So who is the long-term partner for Erigbenum or Jimmy Garner?
Yeah, well, they had the oldest average age of any Premier League team at the weekend. It was 28.4, and they looked like they needed a injection of energy, let's say. Their passes per defensive action, so how many passes you allow your opposition before you interject and try and make a defensive action, that stood at 18.3 on the weekend, which was the 3rd worst in the Premier League, or the 3rd least active in terms of pressing, behind Leicester and Ipswich, 2 newly promoted sides. So I'm going for a player that I actually saw linked quite annoyingly after I was doing my prep for this with the likes of RB Leipzig yesterday, Fabrizio Romano doing it. I thought, that's a real shame. But if they could get in ahead of that, that would be great. Arthur Vermeeren, he joined Atletico Madrid last January. They've just signed Conor Gallagher. They've still got Koke, Rodrigo de Paul, Marcus Llorente kicking around. He didn't get a lot of minutes last year. He only played 160 minutes in the back half of last year. But he was really, really solid for Royal Antwerp for quite a few seasons prior to that. He played 65 appearances back-to-back. He performed well in the Champions League. He got a goal versus Barcelona, 2 assists versus Shakhtar Donetsk. But that makes you think, he's more like a 10. which is actually not the case. So his best attributes are actually defensively. Over 4 tackles and interceptions, but looks really composed on the ball as well, and really high for interceptions and blocks. I think he reads the game very well. He's got a little bit of everything, quite a lot of technical quality, and doesn't feel like Atletico Madrid want him. But there will maybe be competition from clubs higher up that have got European football to offer.
Mikey.
Okay. I've gone for, I think, a fairly punchy target here. Not necessarily in terms of money, but like almost on the Vermeer and kind of scale of things in terms of a player who I think bigger clubs should be looking at, really. But it's been relatively quiet around his name compared to, say, a year or especially like 2 years ago. And that's Manu Kone at Borussia Mönchengladbach. I just think, Everton did it before with Amadou Onana. Like, he was a very punchy target, and I think Manu Kone would cost significantly less than him now, given that the speculation around him has lessened a lot in the last couple of years, given the fact that he's only got 2 years left on his deal at Mönchengladbach. And also there's kind of similarities in that he is someone who, like Onana, isn't a pure number 6 and can actually drive the ball forward, but he's better at that than Onana. And maybe the Premier League would be a bit tougher for him for doing that than the Bundesliga, but he's further along his development than Onana was when he arrived at Everton. When you look at his underlying numbers, they actually profile relatively similar to someone like Idrissa Gueye. They also profile weirdly similar to someone like Mateo Kovacic as well. And in terms of long-term for Everton, they do want to be a Europa League club again. If they can find that buyer, I know there was the reports with John Textor over the last couple of weeks. If they do find that buyer, if they move into that new stadium, they can get themselves back on their feet, then I think the kind of player they need in that squad is a young, a player in the mould of Manu Kone. I think he could be gettable for 20-30 million pounds. It just depends whether they face competition for him, but at the moment it doesn't look like there are tons of clubs sniffing around. Apparently he's a target for Roma as well, so that's who they'd be up against. So he wouldn't be easy to get out of there, but I just think as an all-round deep-lying midfielder, I think he'd be a great fit.
Yeah, obviously a great pitch, isn't it? Like, I also was again surprised the transfer involving Southampton. They weren't involved in the loan for Leslie Ugachukwu leaving Chelsea. Like, it felt like quite a natural fit in that Everton midfield alongside a player like James Garner or alongside Tim Rigbenham, but he's obviously gone to Southampton now. I'm actually going to give this to Mikey. And I know that seals it for the day.
That's all right.
But I love that.
I thought you were going to build the suspense there.
It's a real, it's a punchy one.
Yeah.
And I think he would take some serious convincing to go to Everton, but that's what we're here for.
Sean Dyche is good at convincing people.
Can we get a striker suggestion as well?
For
I know the game's gone.
I want to finish on a bang. I think this player is really high quality. He was linked with Marseille earlier this summer. It fell through. Yusufa Moukoko of Borussia Dortmund. They signed Serhou Guirassy. They signed Maximilian Bayer. He doesn't feel wanted at Borussia Dortmund. He wasn't really used by Edin Terzic last year. Nuri Sahin has already signed, as I say, 2 other strikers. He is a goal scorer. He is a pure goal scorer. He averages a goal every 140 minutes for Dortmund, which, considering he's been in and out of the side.
And he's so young.
Really, really impressive at that age. His youth record is absolutely remarkable. 141 goals in 88 games for Dortmund's under-17 and under-19 record. He's completely different in profile to Beto and Calvert-Lewin, which I really like as well. He's small, he's diminutive, but he has an unbelievably powerful shot, and I think he'd be really fun at Everton. He's also fairly creative as well, created over a chance per 90 last year. He's valued at 22 million euros. There's 2 years remaining on his contract. I think he could easily be gettable for Everton.
Great shout.
Yeah,
Mikey?
I think long term Moukoko would be amazing for Everton if they can, if they can get the system right around him. My striker shout is actually a real short-term option for Everton, but someone who I think could actually potentially be gettable in the next week, given that Nottingham Forest
Chris Wood.
look like I was
thinking Chris Wood. In my head, I was like, he's building out to Chris Wood there.
But yeah, if who knows? Nketiah might have gone to Nottingham Forest by the time people are watching this. We'll see. Like, at the moment when we're filming this, it looks like they're really advancing on that deal, and I just think Everton need goals. Like, they need goals and they need them now. Like, they underperformed XG, like we were saying with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but only Sheffield United scored fewer goals than them last year, and Beto and Dominic Calvert-Lewin had tons of chances between them last year. Chris Wood is one of the most clinical strikers in the league, bar none. 14 goals despite only starting 20 times last year. He only managed just over 2 shots a game, and yet his XG per 90 is like up there with the best strikers in Europe.
Yeah, the shot locations are
ridiculous.
insane. They're all 6 yards out headers.
Crazy. And I think, yes, Nottingham Forest were underrated at creating chances last year, but I think so were Everton a little bit as well. And look, Deitch as well. Get Deitch and Wood.
Come on,
Wood in a season, in his 4 full seasons under Deitch at Burnley, who were fighting relegation in almost every one of those seasons, he never scored fewer than 10 goals. I just think,
come on, sporting director, come on.
But
what am I smelling here? I am smelling Chris Wood to Everton, man. I don't know.
I can't believe this is a clean sweep.
I could actually see this deal happening.
But the reason Forest are going for Nketiah is they don't want to have
but
Awoniyi and Chris Wood, who are a little bit injury prone, or Chris Wood you can't rely on.
But fees are important. PSR is important to a club like Nottingham Forest. The Eddie Nketiah deal was expensive,
and he's got 1 year left on his deal. Chris Wood, if they don't sell him this week, he's gone for free next summer.
I can't believe what I'm hearing.
Obviously, an ideal world, Forest would keep him, and I actually agree with you. He's one of the few strikers in Premier League history to have scored over 5 10+ goal hauls in a single season. I think he's like a bit of a guarantee of goals for Everton, even if it's 8 to 10. That is probably what they need to stay up this season. It's going to be an Everton clean sweep.
No, I love Makoko. I actually can't believe it.
But I just don't see it happening to Everton. He's going to end up somewhere in Europe, somewhere in France. Chris Wood smells of Everton. So there we have it.
Oh, well, guys, that was a lot of fun. I don't think Mikey stuck to the budget whatsoever, but he is the winner of today's show.
I think I did all right with the Everton budget.
The sporting director was just seeing, pound signs
Chris
everywhere.
Wood, £5 million.
I love some of Mikey's
£10 million.
They were good. Guys, whose suggestions did you prefer? Which ones did we miss out? Get in the comments. Huge thank you to our winner for today, Mikey McCubbin, and our sporting director. I'll be slipping him a tenner ahead of next week's episode. Decide ahead of what we might do for next week. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you then. Bye-bye.